You arrested these people where they are, and where's the family of Bin Laden?
What Bob was saying before about bringing in other countries maybe from the Middle East, because certainly the coalition of the willing and the friends in NATO seem to be deserting the US, as James Rawson discovers.
When US President Barack Obama announced he was sending a further 30,000 troops to Afghanistan, his supporters assumed Western allies would follow his lead with more soldiers. But the unity has been shaken by events thousands of miles away in Europe, following the collapse of the Dutch coalition government. Jan-Peter Balkenende, the Christian Democrat Prime Minister, wanted to keep the troops in Afghanistan, but failed in a 16-hour cabinet meeting to persuade Labour colleagues. The Dutch troops should originally have left the Uruzgan province in 2008, but their deployment was extended because no other NATO country could be persuaded to replace them. 2 years later, the situation remains the same. Adding to that problem, another big question being asked is which country will replace Canada's 2,800 troops, due to leave next year. Both these withdrawals provide a huge blow to Obama's plans to expand the military presence. Clearly, the NATO coalition is not as committed as it once was. Following the collapse of Balkenende's government, it was noted that the Dutch leader was the last surviving head of government from George W. Bush's original coalition of the willing, which came together for the ill-fated war in Iraq. Western politicians realised that the war in Afghanistan is unpopular, with the voting public not least because of the mounting death tolls. Grieving relatives and the images of flag-draped coffins returning home is costing the battle for hearts and minds on the home front. President Obama's critics are already drawing parallels with Vietnam, a disastrous war which still haunts the American public.
Professor, are NATO countries legally obliged to commit troops? No. I mean, everything's just peeling away in Afghanistan, and, you know, who's going to be left?
No, there's absolutely no legal obligation at all. It's an alliance, and some will be persuaded to send some troops, provided they don't have to fight, and some will send some troops and allow them to fight, and some will withdraw their troops. Without putting too fine a point on it, the Dutch have a bit of a record of this.
Well, the Dutch are going, the Canadians are wanting out. Obama had hoped, when he said he was going to commit 30,000 troops, that others would follow, and that hasn't really come through.
That's true, yes. I think the British sent 500 troops, and a few more have been sent by one or two other countries. But when President Obama sent his troops, he made it absolutely explicit that in a year's time he would begin to withdraw them. So there's just a very temporary surge, on the assumption that the surge will work in Afghanistan as it allegedly did in Iraq, and then he'll begin to withdraw them. And I suppose many NATO countries might say, well, if he's only sending them for a year, it's not worth us sending them at all.
Bob, what is the point of these surges? I mean, if I was a Taliban fighter, I'd think, well, I'm just going to take a holiday or a break for a few months, and once the surge is over, I'm coming back again.
The point of the surge is to actually put more troops on the ground, to actually complete the pacification, if you like, of an area, and allow that area to be held so that the people feel safer. So if the people feel safer, that will be less likely that the Taliban would be able to come back, because the Afghan National Army should also have been built up sufficiently to provide security for the people. And there we have it. There we have the problem, because if you've got a corrupt government and you've got an Afghan National Army that's not up to speed, it's not going to work.
Let's examine this Afghan National Army closer, because ideally the ethnicity of the army should reflect the ethnicity of the country, and it doesn't. The majority of soldiers speak Dari and are Tajik.
Yes.
And the people who have been evacuated or moved out of their homes, the majority are Pashtun. People looking at that will say this is ethnic cleansing.
Well, I don't agree with it, it's ethnic cleansing, but it's not satisfactory for Tajiks to be involved in moving or helping Pashtuns. I agree with that situation, but there is no intention in the military strategy. I'm quite certain of that. For any approach to ethnic cleansing, what they're trying to do is to try and protect the people. They've done it wrong because perhaps they haven't provided homes for people to go to in the short term.
Well, before I bring Fahim in on this, would it constitute ethnic cleansing? Having an army dominated by one ethnic group, moving another ethnic group out of their homes?
Well, if the intention was to move them out and keep them out permanently, then yes, but I have no evidence that that is the intention. I think I'm also right in saying that although the majority of, if you like, the rank and file of the army are non-Pashtun, a lot of the officers are Pashtun.
Fahim, how is it being perceived by ordinary people on the ground? I know that you know, you do have your finger on the pulse of what's happening out there.
Well, from the Afghan perspective, it's not much more towards ethnic cleansing. The main problem for our people is we have been victimized by human rights violators time and again. And these human rights violators, mass murderers, warlords are installed, imposed on Afghans in every Afghan institution. It's not the problem of being Tajik, Uzbek or Hazara. This, I would say, this is not a big problem. If it is Tajik, he's my brother. If it's Hazara, he's my brother. It doesn't matter. My people have got problem with the human rights violators because they commit crimes, they order the mass murders. This is the problem. And who is competent? He must be my leader. He must be in my army.
What is the perception of the army?
Matter.
What is the perception of the Afghan National Army, and why aren't there many more Pashtuns in the army?
Well, again, the problem is because the system has been controlled by human rights violators, and they have been supported by United States and NATO. And this is how Afghans have been left out. We are not being listened to. This is the biggest problem we have.
So are you saying that Pashtuns would join, but they're not being encouraged to join? I think about 3% of the Pashtun from the south are represented in the army.
I would say I would not go much deep into the Pashtun-Tajik issue, because this is not what the Afghans look at it. Afghans do not look at it, why Pashtuns are not here, why Pashtuns are here. The problem is, who are the competent people who can run us?
Well, the reality is the majority of the Taliban are Pashtun, and the majority of the soldiers in the Afghan army are Tajik.
Well, the reality is because the reality is because of the geography. The reality is because it happened to be from that part. You can't change. You can't bring Tajik Taliban. Among the Taliban, there are Tajiks. Among our army, there is Pashtun. But the problem is not why Pashtuns are more or less. The problem is the human rights violators. They hide behind these walls. It is them who created these walls. And this is how they run the show.